Let's be honest, there comes a point where you're just done. Done crying over someone who never saw your worth. Done replaying the conversations, done making excuses for their behavior, and here's the truth: no one tells you when your heart is breaking. You don't need to get even. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to remember who you are. This isn't about bitterness. It's about clarity. You're not stuck in heartbreak. You're standing at the edge of freedom. And when you stop pouring energy into someone who was never ready to receive your love, that is when karma starts doing the talking. Because trust me, there's nothing louder than your silence, and nothing colder than being forgotten by the person who once had it all. When someone walks out of your life, especially in a way that leaves you hurt or confused, the instinct is often to search for answers. You replay conversations, dissect their words, and wonder if you did something wrong. That pain is real. The tears you've shed are valid, but staying stuck in that space, where your energy is tied to someone who's no longer there, isn't healing. It's self-punishment. And eventually you have to decide, do I keep giving them power, or do I take it back? That's where real healing begins, not when they apologize, not when they come back, not even when karma gets them. Healing starts the moment you say, enough. That's not a loud declaration to the world. It's a quiet decision within yourself to stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. The tears might not stop immediately, but your reason for crying shifts. You're not crying because they left. You're crying because you're releasing the hold they had on you. And that's powerful. There's a misconception that healing is passive, that it means sitting around waiting to feel better. But true healing is a choice, a bold, intentional, and sometimes painful one. You wake up and decide, today, I'm not texting them. Today, I'm not checking their page. Today, I'm choosing me. You do that again tomorrow and the next day, until eventually those decisions stack up. One morning, you'll realize you haven't thought about them in hours. Then days, then weeks. That's not weakness. That's emotional strength in motion. We often want closure. We think if we just understood why they did what they did, we'd feel better. But more often than not, closure doesn't come from them. It comes from accepting that they were not capable of loving you the way you deserved, and that it's not your job to teach them how. You don't need to make sense of their actions to move on. You just need to make peace with the fact that they were not the one. Period. Walking away from someone who hurt you isn't weakness. It's one of the strongest things you'll ever do. Because you're not just walking away from them. You're walking away from the version of yourself that kept settling. You're choosing growth over comfort, and while that choice can feel lonely at first, it leads to something far more fulfilling than a one-sided relationship ever could. Let's be clear, this isn't about revenge. You're not healing so you can throw it in their face. You're not getting stronger just to show them what they lost. You're doing it because you deserve to feel whole again, because your life is too precious to waste on someone who only saw parts of your value. Healing becomes your power move, not to hurt them, but to protect you. One day, they may realize what they had. They may look back and feel the sting of your absence. That's their journey, but by then you'll be so far ahead, so grounded in your worth, that it won't matter. The person they hurt will no longer exist. You will have become someone they don't even recognize, and that is how you win. Not with anger, not with spite, but with peace, with a life so full and beautiful, there's no room left for tears. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop trying to control the outcome of someone else's actions and start trusting that the universe has a way of balancing the scales. When someone hurts you, betrays your trust, or walks away without explanation, the instinct is often to seek justice. You want them to know the pain they caused. You want them to regret it. You want them to feel even a fraction of what you felt. And that's completely human. But here's the truth: karma doesn't need your assistance. It doesn't work on your timeline, and it certainly doesn't require your emotional energy to function. When you hold on to anger, resentment, or the desire for revenge, you think you're staying strong, but what you're really doing is staying stuck. The more you focus on what they did, the more power you give to the very person who mishandled your heart. And you don't owe them that power. They already took enough from you. The least you can do now is reclaim your peace. Trusting karma isn't about being naive or pretending you're unaffected. It's about choosing not to carry the weight of their mistakes. You don't need to call them out or expose them to the world. People eventually meet the consequences of their actions, even if it takes time. And if they don't, that's still not your responsibility. You weren't put on this earth to manage someone else's life lesson. Your job is to keep growing, to keep healing, and to live in such a way that their absence becomes irrelevant. There's a quiet kind of power in not reacting, in not sending the message, in not watching their stories or asking mutual friends for updates. It's not because you don't care, it's because you've decided your peace is worth more than their drama. And whether they realize it or not, your silence speaks louder than anything you could say. It says, I no longer need anything from you, not love, not apology, not even acknowledgement. That kind of detachment is what truly unsettles people who are used to holding power over others. Karma isn't just about revenge. It's about alignment. When someone repeatedly chooses dishonesty, disloyalty, or manipulation, they distance themselves from genuine connection. They create a pattern of shallow relationships and broken trust. You may not be around to witness their consequences, but they will feel them, maybe not publicly, but deeply. And it's not your job to clap when they fall. Your job is to rise. People who do wrong often expect two reactions, rage or begging. They feed off either. What they don't expect is indifference. They don't expect to be unfollowed, unbothered, and forgotten. They don't expect you to move on without fanfare. That's what shakes them. But again, it's not about shaking them. It's about freeing you. Let karma play its role in the background while you rebuild a life that's better without them in it. Eventually, you'll reach a point where you stop even hoping for karma to catch up with them, not because you've given up, but because you genuinely no longer care. You'll be so immersed in your own healing, in the people who love you right, in the version of yourself you fought hard to become, that their story won't interest you anymore. They'll just be a chapter you finished, one you no longer feel the need to reread, and when that moment comes, it won't feel like revenge. It will feel like freedom. There's a moment in every healing journey where you stop needing them to understand how much they hurt you. You stop needing the apology that never came, the explanation that never made sense, the conversation that was never had. That moment doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. It might even catch you off guard. But it's powerful because in that moment, you've started detaching. And detachment isn't bitterness. It isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's realizing that no matter how much you cared, your peace is no longer up for negotiation. When you detach, you reclaim control over your emotions. You stop being triggered by their name, their silence, or their presence online. You stop being a puppet to their actions or inactions. Detachment isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about caring more about yourself than the situation. It's about no longer allowing someone else's chaos to disturb your inner calm. And the truth is, the people who hurt you the most will often be the ones most bothered by your calmness. They expected you to break. They relied on your reaction to validate their power. So when you give them nothing, that's what really stings. It's easy to confuse detachment with emotional distance, but they're not the same. You can still love deeply and choose detachment. You can still feel pain and not act on it. Emotional maturity is being able to sit with your feelings without letting them dictate your response. You don't need to throw words, post cryptic messages, or prove you've moved on. Your lack of reaction does that for you. When someone sees that you're no longer trying to convince them of your worth, they start to question why they ever underestimated you in the first place. People who are used to you explaining yourself, chasing, overgiving, they notice when that energy disappears. Suddenly, their ego doesn't get fed. They don't have the same access to your heart, your time, or your attention. That's what detachment does. It puts up an invisible wall that says, I've outgrown the version of me who needed this validation. And when you reach that place, something incredible happens. You stop wanting them to come back, not because the pain didn't matter, but because you matter more. You begin to see the situation for what it was, not through the lens of hope or fantasy, but through honesty. You acknowledge the parts of yourself that compromised too much, that held on too tightly, that kept seeing potential instead of patterns. And instead of judging yourself for that, you forgive yourself, because that version of you didn't know better. But now you do. Now you choose differently. Now you choose peace. People often think winning means getting the last word or proving someone wrong. But real power is being unshakable in your silence. Real confidence is letting go without the need for recognition. Detachment isn't something you force, it's something you grow into. It comes from showing up for yourself over and over again until one day the need for their validation just fades. You start living for yourself, not for their attention. You stop performing emotional labor for someone who never showed up for you in the first place. And when you reach that point, when their actions no longer move you, when you can wish them well and mean it, even from a distance, you know you've truly healed. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you stopped holding on. You finally understand that the energy you were giving away so freely is far too valuable to waste on someone who didn't recognize its worth. You no longer chase peace in someone else's chaos. You are the peace, and you protect it. Every time you excuse someone's bad behavior, you teach them how to treat you. Whether it's brushing off a lie, tolerating disrespect, or justifying broken promises, you're sending a silent message. This is okay. But deep down, you know it's not. And here's the uncomfortable truth: what you allow is what will continue. Relationships are built not just on love or attraction, but on boundaries. Clear, consistent, unapologetic boundaries. Without them, even the most passionate connection can turn toxic. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if you love someone enough, they'll eventually change. You give them chance after chance, hoping this time they'll finally see your worth. You explain your pain, hoping they'll hear you. You stay patient, thinking your loyalty will inspire growth. But love doesn't fix people. Love isn't a rehab center. And someone who refuses to change after they've seen how their behavior affects you isn't confused. They're comfortable. Comfortable in the knowledge that you'll stay. Comfortable knowing they can't cross lines without consequences. Every time you downplay your needs or bite your tongue to keep the peace, you betray yourself. And the more you do it, the more you lose your voice, until one day you don't recognize yourself in the mirror, not because you've changed for the better, but because you've bent so far for someone else that you've become a stranger to your own standards. That's not love, that's self-abandonment dressed up as devotion. There's a strength in walking away from what doesn't grow you, even if it once felt like everything. It takes courage to say, this isn't enough for me, especially when your heart is still attached. But the longer you tolerate the bare minimum, the more you teach someone that your needs are optional, and they're not. You are not too much for wanting consistency, respect, or effort. Those aren't luxuries. They're the foundation of any healthy relationship. And if someone makes you feel like you're asking for too much by demanding basics, they're not the right person. You have to remember that boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about protecting your peace. They're the filter that separates those who are willing to grow with you from those who only want to take from you. And yes, setting boundaries might mean losing some people. But if respecting yourself costs you a relationship, it wasn't a healthy one to begin with. Sometimes the real lesson isn't about whether someone else will step up. It's about whether you're willing to stop shrinking. This isn't about becoming hard or emotionally unavailable. It's about learning to love without losing yourself. It's about recognizing red flags before they become regrets. When you start honoring your boundaries, you naturally attract people who are aligned with your standards, people who don't just tolerate your strength, but respect it, people who don't make you beg for love, clarity, or commitment. You can't teach someone to treat you better by tolerating the worst of them. Change doesn't come from lectures or ultimatums. It comes from action. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and let them sit with the silence you leave behind, because once they realize they can't access you the same way, they'll either rise to meet your standards or disappear. Either way, you win, because you're no longer settling. In the end, love should never cost you your self-respect. You weren't put here to teach someone how to treat you while bleeding from the wounds they caused. You deserve a love that doesn't need reminders on how to show up, and that starts with you showing up for yourself fully, unapologetically, and without compromise. When someone mistreats you, it's easy to internalize their actions as a reflection of your own worth. You start asking the wrong questions. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Could I have fixed this if I had just been more patient, more quiet, more easy to love? That line of thinking is dangerous because it shifts the blame for someone else's emotional immaturity onto your shoulders. But the truth is simple, even if it's hard to accept. How someone chooses to treat you is a reflection of who they are, not who you are. Your value isn't measured by someone else's ability to recognize it. Just because they failed to love you properly doesn't mean you were unlovable. Some people aren't capable of giving what you need, not because your needs are too much, but because they are limited in what they can offer. That's not your fault. That's not your burden to carry. You are asking for honesty, consistency, respect, all things that are basic requirements in a real relationship. If someone couldn't give you those things, that's on them, not you. Problem is, when you've been dismissed or ignored for long enough, it starts to chip away at your confidence. You begin to believe that maybe you were too intense, too emotional, too needy. But let's reframe that. What if your depth isn't a flaw but a gift? What if your emotional honesty, your loyalty, your willingness to love wholeheartedly are the very things that make you rare, and they just didn't have the capacity to meet you there? It's not that you were asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. You handed your heart to someone who didn't know how to hold it. You kept showing up for someone who didn't know how to receive you, and that disconnect had nothing to do with your worth. It had everything to do with their limitations. When people can't meet your emotional needs, they often make you feel like your needs are the problem. That's emotional deflection. It's easier for them to call you too much than to admit they're giving too little. But deep down, you know better. You know you were willing to show up. You know you were trying. You know you gave love in a way that was real and brave. Don't let someone else's inability to reciprocate that convince you that your love wasn't valuable. It's easy to confuse rejection with truth, but they're not the same. Rejection is someone's personal decision based on their perspective, wounds, and emotional availability. Truth is deeper than that. Truth is knowing who you are when no one's validating you. Truth is understanding that your kindness, your vulnerability, your effort, that all still has worth even when it's not returned. Your value doesn't decrease just because someone failed to honor it. You were always worthy of love, even in your most broken state. You were always enough. Even when they made you feel otherwise, the mistake wasn't in loving. It was in staying too long after the love stopped being mutual. But that's not something to punish yourself for. That's something to learn from. Going forward, the lesson is simple. Don't let someone's inability to see your value make you question if it's there. It is. It always was. The goal now isn't to make someone see it. It's to surround yourself with people who never needed convincing, because the right person won't ask you to shrink, apologize, or prove yourself. They'll meet you where you are and be grateful to have found someone who brings the depth and love that you do so effortlessly. There comes a point in healing when you stop hoping they'll regret losing you. You stop checking if they're watching your stories, stop imagining the day they come crawling back, and stop needing them to realize how badly they messed up. Not because you've forgotten what they did, but because your life has finally become too full to waste space on people who didn't value you when they had the chance. That's when real freedom begins, not when they say sorry, but when their apology no longer matters. Your best revenge is never loud. It's not found in angry posts, dramatic exits, or staged comebacks. Your best revenge is a life that is so rich in joy, in purpose, in self-respect, that they wouldn't even recognize you if they came back. It's becoming someone so in love with your own peace, you wouldn't let them near you even if they tried. That's not bitterness, that's healing. It's what happens when you stop looking back at what you lost and start pouring everything into what you're building. When someone breaks your heart, especially someone you trusted, there's a very human instinct to prove your worth to them. You want them to see what they threw away. You want them to feel the weight of their choices. But the moment you start living for their regret, you've handed them control again. And they already took too much. So no, you don't build your life around making them miss you. You build your life because you deserve one that makes you proud, whether they ever see it or not. Healing isn't a performance. You don't need to show them how well you're doing. The power lies in knowing you are doing well, regardless of who notices. When you stop curating your growth for the people who hurt you and start growing for yourself, everything shifts. You no longer measure your progress by their silence or their reaction. You measure it by how free you feel when you wake up in the morning without them on your mind. There's no satisfaction in dragging someone back into your life just so they can witness your glow up. That's not closure, that's a distraction. True closure happens quietly, when you no longer feel the urge to explain yourself. When you no longer fantasize about the look on their face when they realize what they lost. When you no longer crave their guilt or their recognition. Because you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed it. You didn't come this far just to prove a point. You didn't rebuild yourself just to make them regret leaving. You did it because you finally understood that your life is yours. That your happiness, your peace, and your growth were never meant to revolve around someone else's approval. You stopped chasing closure and started chasing purpose, and in doing so, you created a life that's no longer built around proving your worth, but protecting it. People who take you for granted expect you to stay broken. They expect you to be stuck, bitter, or quietly waiting in the background for their return. So when you heal, when you move on, when you stop waiting altogether, it shakes them. But by then, it won't matter. You won't be healing to get their attention. You'll be thriving because they no longer have it. And that's the beauty of growth. It makes you untouchable to the very people who once had access to you. It puts you in a place where even if they finally see your worth, they can't reach you, because you've already moved forward. And the space they once occupied is now filled with something better, your own damn peace. So here's the truth, the kind that hits different when you've lived through the heartbreak, the confusion, the silence. You don't need them to regret it. You don't need them to see your worth in hindsight, because you see it now. You've cried, questioned, bent and broke, and still you rose. And that, not revenge, not recognition, is the real victory. This isn't about proving you're better without them. It's about finally realizing you always were enough, even when they couldn't see it. You don't need closure from them when you've created your own peace. You don't need their validation when you've already reclaimed your power. So live your life, not for the ones who left, but for the version of you that stayed even when it was hard. The version who kept showing up, kept healing, kept growing. Let your joy be loud, your boundaries be firm, and your heart remain soft but guarded with wisdom. And when karma does catch up to them, as it always does, it won't even matter, because you'll be too busy living a life that no longer looks back.